The bullet tore through the mahogany doorframe 3 inches from Kang Min-sok's head. He didn't flinch. 20 years in Seoul's underworld had taught him that fear was a luxury reserved for those who still believed they had something to lose. He moved with the fluid precision of a man who danced with death so many times. They were on first-name basis, his Beretta already drawn, already firing back through the smoke-filled corridor of his Gangnam fortress. "Hyungnim, East Perimeter is breached," Park Ji-won's voice crackled through the earpiece, urgent but controlled. His second-in-command knew better than to panic. Panic got you killed. Min-sok dropped the first attacker with 2 shots center mass, watched the body crumple against imported Italian marble, now decorated with blood splatter. The wooden cross under his shirt burned against his skin like it always did when violence came calling. A constant reminder of the grandmother who'd given it to him 20 years ago in Atlanta. The grandmother he'd spent half his life searching for. The grandmother who, unbeknownst to him until 7 hours ago, had been living in Seoul for the past 6 years. "How many?" Min-sok's voice was ice over steel. 15, maybe 20, Kwon Tae-jin's men. They're not here to negotiate." Of course they weren't. The Viper had been circling for months, waiting for weakness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike at the man they called the Reaper of Seoul. And tonight, with Min-sok's attention divided, with his mind still reeling from the impossible reunion that had happened just hours ago, Tae-jin had found his opening. But to understand how the Reaper came to be fighting for his life with everything to lose, you need to understand what happened earlier that night. You need to understand the collision that changed everything. 7 hours earlier, rain hammered Seoul like bullets from heaven. Amara Washington pressed her phone against her ear, her other hand gripping the steering wheel as she navigated flooded streets toward Hangang Senior Care Home. Her grandmother's voice, sharp despite her 72 years, cut through the static. "Baby, the water's up to the first floor. They're evacuating everybody, but I am not going to some Red Cross shelter with 100 other people and no toilet paper. You hear me? Not happening. Grandma, I'm 10 minutes away. Just stay where they tell you. I didn't ask you what I should do. I told you what I'm not doing. Now where am I going?" Amara's mind raced through impossible options. Her tiny apartment in Itaewon couldn't accommodate a wheelchair. Hotels were either flooded or full of other evacuees. The church where Mama Raine did mission work was in an even worse flood zone that left exactly one option, and it was the worst option imaginable. "I'm taking you to work with me," Amara said, already hating herself for it. "The place you manage? The rich man's house?" "He's in Busan for 3 days. We'll stay in. One of the guest wings. He'll never know." "You sure about that, baby?" No, Amara wasn't sure about anything anymore. She'd come to Seoul 6 years ago following her grandmother's call to mission work, planning to stay for 6 months. Then she'd started graduate studies in international development at Yonsei. Then her funding fell through halfway through her master's program. 3 years ago, she'd taken a job as house manager at a mansion in Gangnam because it paid in 1 month what most jobs paid in 6, and she'd convinced herself it was temporary, that she wasn't really working for a crime lord, that managing his staff and his properties didn't make her complicit in whatever blood money paid for the marble and the art and the armed guards. She'd never met Kang Min-sok. In 3 years of employment, she'd never seen him face to face. He was always traveling, always in meetings, always a signature on a paycheck and a list of demands sent through Park Ji-won. She preferred it that way. It let her pretend she was just managing a very secure estate for a very private businessman. The delusion was about to shatter spectacularly. Amara pulled up to the senior care home, helped Mama Raine into the car along with a small bag of essentials. Her grandmother had insisted on bringing her Bible, her blood pressure medication, and for some inexplicable reason, a framed photograph from 2006 that she kept wrapped in a pillowcase. "What's so important about that old picture?" Amara asked as they drove toward Gangnam. "Just memories, baby. Just memories of a little boy I used to know." Mama Raine's voice went distant, the way it always did when she talked about Atlanta, about the years before they'd come to Korea. "Sometimes I wonder what happened to him, if he's still alive." if he thinks about me. The kid you fostered, the Korean boy, wasn't foster, wasn't official anything. Just a child who needed help and a woman who couldn't look away. Mama Raine stared out at the rain-soaked city. I think about him every day. Wonder if I did enough. Wonder if I did too much. Amara wanted to ask more, but they'd arrived at the mansion. She used her key code to open the side entrance, the one the staff used, the one that bypassed most of the security. She'd checked the schedule 3 times. Min-sok wasn't due back until Thursday. Park Ji-won was supervising a shipment at the port. Most of the night guards were handling the flooding in the lower garage levels. They made it to the East Wing guest suite without incident. Amara got her grandmother settled, made tea, tried to ignore the sick feeling in her stomach that this was all going to go horribly wrong. You're shaking, baby, Mama Raine observed. I'm fine. You're scared of him. Your boss, this Kang Min-sok. I've never met him. But you know what he is. What he does? Amara didn't answer. What could she say? Yes, Grandma, I work for a man they call the Reaper. Yes, I know people die on his orders. Yes, I take his money and tell myself I'm different, that I'm not part of it, that I'm just trying to survive in an expensive city while finishing my degree in breaking cycles of violence. The irony wasn't lost on her. I want to see the garden, Mama Raine announced, already standing with her cane. Grandma, no, you need to stay here. Hidden, quiet. I've been hidden and quiet my whole life, baby. Tonight, I want to see what kind of garden a man builds when he's trying to pretend he's not a monster. Before Amara could protest further, Mama Raine was already moving toward the door with the determination of a woman who'd survived Jim Crow, raised 5 children alone, and buried her youngest son in a closed casket after police mistook his phone for a gun. You didn't argue with that kind of steel. They made it to the central hallway before everything fell apart. The front door burst open, and Kang Min-seok walked in flanked by 4 men in dark suits. His face was a roadmap of violence. Split lip, blood dried on his collar, a cut above his left eye that someone had hastily bandaged. His knuckles were raw and swollen. He moved with the barely controlled energy of a predator who just won a fight but knew another one was coming. Park Ji-won was talking urgently, something about the Busan deal going south, about Kwon Tae-jin making moves on their territory, but Min-seok wasn't listening. He'd stopped dead in the hallway, every muscle in his body going rigid like he'd been shot. He was staring at Mama Raine, the color drained from his face. His gun, previously holstered with the casual ease of a man who wore weapons like other people wore watches, slipped from his fingers and clattered on the marble floor. The sound echoed like a crack of thunder. Hyungnim? Park Ji-won reached for his own weapon, his eyes scanning Mama Raine and Amara for threat, trying to understand why his boss had just frozen like a statue. Min-sok's lips moved, but no sound came out, at first. His hands were shaking, visibly trembling in a way that made all 4 of his men go rigid with alarm. Then, in a voice Amara would later realize none of his men had ever heard, broken and young and desperately, achingly hopeful, he whispered, Mama Raine. The wooden cross fell out of his partially unbuttoned shirt, swinging on its chain. Mama Raine's eyes locked onto it and her cane clattered to the floor. Her hand flew to her mouth. Min? My sweet boy? Little Min? Kang Min-seok, the Reaper of Seoul, the man who'd built an empire on fear and blood, the man whose name made hardened criminals cross the street, dropped to his knees in the middle of his marble hallway. His shoulders shook as tears streamed down his face, mixing with the dried blood on his collar. He wept like the terrified 10-year-old he'd once been, the sound raw and broken and utterly human. I searched for you, he said in Korean, then English, then Korean again, words tumbling out in a broken mess of languages and grief. His voice cracked on every syllable. Everywhere. 15 years of searching. I thought you were dead. I thought I'd never... Mama Raine crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, despite her cane, and pulled his head against her chest. the way she had 2 decades ago in Atlanta when he'd shown up on her doorstep, beaten and bleeding and speaking broken English. Her weathered hands cradled his face, her thumbs wiping away his tears. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. I got you." Park Ji-won and the other men stood frozen, their expressions cycling through shock, confusion, and deep unease. They'd never seen Min-seok show emotion, ever. He was a machine, a calculator, death in an expensive suit. He didn't cry. He didn't kneel. He didn't break. Except he was breaking now. 20 years of carefully constructed armor cracking apart like cheap plaster, and every man in that hallway was witnessing the birth of a vulnerability that would get them all killed if word got out. Amara felt the world tilt sideways. This was her grandmother, the woman who'd raised her, who taught her to pray and cook and stand up straight and never back down. And this was Kang Min-seok, the Reaper, her employer, a man she'd never met, but feared deeply. And they knew each other. They loved each other. What the hell was happening? Min-seok finally pulled himself together enough to stand, though he kept one of Mama Raine's hands clutched in both of his, like he was afraid she'd vanish if he let go. His men were still staring. Park Ji-won had lowered his weapon, but his expression screamed 1,000 questions. "Out," Min-seok said hoarsely, his voice still thick with tears. "Everyone out. Now." "Hyungnim, with respect, we need to discuss—" "I said out." The Reaper's voice snapped back into place, cold and absolute. "Sweep the perimeter, check the security feeds, make sure Choi De-sung has the night shift covered. And if I hear that anyone spoke about what they just saw, I'll remove their tongue personally. Understood?" The men filed out quickly. Only Park Ji-won hesitated at the door. "Hyungnim, there's been chatter. Kwon Taijin is— I don't care if Taijin is dancing on Gwanghwamun. I need 10 minutes. Give me 10 minutes. Park Ji-won nodded and disappeared, but his face said he knew those 10 minutes might cost them everything. The door clicked shut, and suddenly it was just the three of them in a hallway bigger than most people's apartments. Min-seok turned to Amara as if seeing her for the first time. "Who are you?" "Amara Washington. I'm your house manager. I've worked here for 3 years. You're her granddaughter." It wasn't a question. He could see the resemblance now, the same sharp intelligence in the eyes, the same set to the jaw that said you could break them, but you couldn't make them bow. "Yes." "How long has she been in Seoul?" 6 years. She does mission work in Itaewon, feeds the homeless, teaches English at the church. She moved here in 2020. Min-seok made a sound like he'd been gut-punched. His face went pale again and he pressed his palm against his forehead. "I searched everywhere. Atlanta, LA, every city in America with a Korean population. I had investigators. I had resources. How did I miss—" "Because you were looking in America," Mama Raine said gently. "And I came here looking for the children nobody else wanted to find. Funny how we ended up in the same city." "It's not funny. It's—" His voice cracked again, and he pressed his palms against his eyes. "You can't be here. It's not safe. Taijin is making moves and my men just saw me break down. And this house, this whole life, it's not—" "I didn't ask for safe men. I asked to see you again. I prayed for it every day for 20 years. I killed people, Mama Raine. A lot of people. I'm not the boy you saved. I'm something else now. Something you wouldn't recognize." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the fresh scar above his eye, feeling the tension in his jaw. "I recognize pain when I see it, baby, and I recognize a good heart drowning in bad choices. You're still in there. I can see you." The look on Min-seok's face was devastating in its naked hope and despair. Amara felt like she was intruding on something sacred and terrible, a collision of past and present that was going to destroy everything it touched. "We need to talk," Min-seok said finally. "All of us. I need to understand how this happened. And you—" He looked at Mama Raine with something like fear in his eyes. "You need to understand what I became. What I did, who I killed to survive. They moved to his study, a room Amara had only cleaned but never truly seen. Now she noticed details: the lack of personal photographs, the surveillance monitors showing every angle of the property, the gun safe built into the wall disguised as a bookshelf. This was a war room pretending to be an office. Minsok poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and drank it in one swallow, his hand shaking slightly as he set the glass down. He was still wearing the cross outside his shirt now, touching it occasionally like a talisman. "Start from the beginning," he said, his voice more controlled now but still rough. "After my father took me, after Atlanta, I need to know what happened to you." Mama Raine settled into the leather chair like she was sitting in her own kitchen. "I tried to stop him, Min. You know I did. But he had names. My grandchildren's names. Their schools. He said if I caused problems, accidents could happen. So I let you go, and I hated myself for it every day since." "You didn't let me go. He stole me." Felt the same to me. She was quiet for a moment, her hands gripping the arms of the chair. "I sold that house 2 years later. Couldn't afford it. Couldn't stand being there without you. Every corner reminded me of you learning to read at my kitchen table, you sleeping on my couch because you were afraid to be alone. Moved in with my daughter for a while. Then in 2020, my church got a call about a mission in Seoul. Korean American communities, immigrant populations needing support. They asked if anyone would go for a year. I volunteered immediately." "Why?" "Because I had a feeling, called it the Holy Spirit, called it intuition, called it whatever you want. But I felt you pulling at me across the ocean. Felt like you were here. So I came. Brought Amara with me because she'd just finished undergrad and wanted to see the world. We were supposed to stay 1 year. That was 6 years ago." Minsok turned to Amara. "And you ended up working for me by accident." "By church connection. The Korean Presbyterian Church in Itaewon does outreach to businesses. Someone knew you needed a house manager 3 years ago. I needed money for grad school. I never thought... why would I think?" She couldn't finish the sentence. "How do you explain that you never connected your grandmother's lost Korean boy with your employer because one was a child in a story and the other was a crime lord you'd never met?" "What do you study?" "International development. Specifically, breaking cycles of violence in post-conflict communities." The irony hung in the air like smoke. Minseok laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You're studying how to fix men like me while taking money from me to do it. That's perfect." "I didn't know," Amara said defensively. "I never met you. You were just a name, and a paycheck, and now you know, now you're looking at what your grandmother's lost boy became." He turned back to Mama Raine, and his mask slipped completely. "You want to know what happened to me? After Seoul? After my father sold me to his brother's organization for $50,000? Mama Raine's face hardened, but she nodded. Minsok's words came out clinical, detached, like he was reading a police report on someone else's life. "I was 11 when they put a gun in my hand. 12 when I killed my first person. One of my uncle's rivals. They made me do it to prove my loyalty. 14 when I realized I was good at it. At the violence. At the calculations. By 16, I was running operations. By 22, I'd killed my uncle and taken over the Crimson Tigers. By 25, I'd absorbed 3 rival organizations and controlled 40% of Seoul's underworld. They started calling me the Reaper. They still do." "And your father?" Mama Raine's voice was steel. "I found him in 2019. He was living in Busan, working for a smaller gang, still drinking himself to death slowly. I made it faster." "You killed him?" "Yes." Silence filled the room like water filling a sinking ship. Amara waited for her grandmother to recoil, to condemn, to reject the confession. Instead, Mama Raine stood and crossed to him, taking his scarred hands in hers. "I'm sorry you had to carry that alone. I'm sorry I wasn't there to help you carry it." Minseok's face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. "You shouldn't be sorry. You should be disgusted. You should run. I should do exactly what I'm doing, sitting here with my boy who survived something no child should survive. She squeezed his hands. The blood on your hands doesn't change that I love you. It just means we've got more work to do. The emotion in the room was suffocating. Amara felt tears on her own face, though she wasn't sure when she'd started crying. This man was a monster by any objective measure. He'd just admitted to murder. Multiple murders. He controlled an empire built on fear and violence, but the way he looked at her grandmother, the desperate, aching need to be seen as something other than a weapon, that was achingly human. He was both things at once, the terrified child and the terrible man he'd become to survive. You can't stay here, Min-seok said finally, his voice hoarse. Both of you. It's not safe. When word gets out that I have people I care about, people who matter to me, they'll use you against me. Taejin will use you. Everyone will use you. Then don't let word get out, Amara heard herself say. Both of them looked at her. I've been invisible in this house for 3 years. I can stay invisible. Grandma can stay in the guest wing. No one needs to know. My men already know. Park Ji-won saw everything. Choi Dae-sung will hear about it within the hour. By tomorrow morning, every organization in Seoul will know the Reaper has a weakness. So what do you want us to do? Leave? Go back to a flooded apartment and pretend this didn't happen? Amara's voice rose. She spent 20 years thinking about you. You spent 15 years searching for her. You found each other. And you want us to just walk away? I want you to live. I want you safe. Those are mutually exclusive with being near me. Mama Raine stood up, and despite being half Min-seok's height, she somehow commanded the room. Min baby, I didn't survive 72 years of racism, poverty, losing my husband and burying my son just to die scared in a nursing home. I found you. Finally, I found you. So here's what's going to happen. I'm staying. Amara's staying. And you're going to figure out how to keep us safe because that's what family does. They figure it out. Family? The word broke on his lips. You think that cross around your neck was just jewelry? That was a promise, Min. That was me telling you that you're mine and I'm yours and nothing breaks that. Not distance, not time, not even this. She gestured at the surveillance monitors, the gun safe, the trappings of his violent life. So we're family. Accept it. The next morning, Min-seok made a decision that would either solidify his power or destroy it completely. He called an assembly of his entire organization in the mansion's central courtyard. Over 100 men gathered, enforcers, lieutenants, soldiers, accountants, all the moving parts of his empire. Amara watched from a second-floor window, her stomach churning. Mama Raine stood beside her, calm as a church service. This is insane, Amara whispered. He's going to paint targets on our backs. He's going to establish boundaries. There's a difference. Min-seok stood on the courtyard steps, Park Ji-won at his right hand. Choi Dae-sung, the head of security, stood with his arms crossed, his expression skeptical. He was old guard, the kind who believed emotions were liabilities and family was a trap. Most of you have heard rumors, Min-seok began, his voice carrying across the courtyard without a microphone. Let me confirm them. Last night I was reunited with someone from my past. Someone who saved my life when I was a child. Someone who matters to me more than this organization, more than this empire, more than any of you. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Choi Dae-sung's expression went from skeptical to openly hostile. Her name is Lorraine Washington. She goes by Mama Raine. She is now under my protection, along with her granddaughter Amara. They are family. My family. And here's what that means for all of you. Min-seok's voice went cold, the Reaper sliding back into place. If anyone disrespects them, you answer to me. If anyone threatens them, you die. If anyone uses them as leverage or even speaks their names without reverence, I will make sure your death becomes a lesson for everyone else. Are we clear? The courtyard was silent. Then Choi Dae-sung laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. Hyungnim, with all respect, this is a mistake. We're in the middle of a territory war with Kwantaejin. The other families are circling. This is not the time to show weakness. I didn't ask for your opinion, Dae-sung. Then let me give it anyway. You're letting emotion cloud your judgment. This woman, whoever she is, she's a liability. Send her away. Send them both away. Handle this the way you've handled every other complication. Eliminate the problem. The courtyard held its breath. Min-seok descended the steps slowly, each footfall deliberate. He stopped directly in front of Choi Dae-sung, and Amara could see her grandmother's hands grip the windowsill. Say that again, Min-seok said quietly, his hand moving to his holster. I said eliminate. The gunshot was deafening. Choi Dae-sung screamed and collapsed, clutching his leg where Min-seok had shot him in the kneecap. Blood pooled rapidly on the courtyard stones. The other men scrambled backward, hands moving toward weapons, but nobody actually drawing. Nobody sure what was happening or whose side to take. That's for suggesting I kill my family, Min-seok said, his voice conversational, as Dae-sung writhed on the ground. The next one is for thinking you could question my decisions. Do you want the next one, Dae-sung? No, Hyungnim, please. Dae-sung's face was twisted in agony, sweat pouring down his temples. Then get out of my sight, you're fired. Park, get him. Medical attention, and then get him off my property. If I see him again, I'll finish what I started. Park Ji-won and two others hauled the bleeding Dae-sung away, leaving a trail of blood across the courtyard. The rest of the assembly stood frozen, trying to process what they just witnessed. Their boss had shot his own head of security over an old woman and her granddaughter. Anyone else have concerns? Min-seok scanned the crowd. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Good. Mama Raine and Amara are off limits. Spread the word to every organization in Seoul. The Reaper has family now. That doesn't make me weak. It makes me more dangerous because now I have something to protect. And you all know what I do to protect what's mine. He turned and walked back into the mansion, leaving 100 men grappling with a new and terrifying reality. Their calculated, emotionless boss was capable of love, which meant he was also capable of the kind of rage that love unleashed when threatened. Amara stepped back from the window, her hands shaking. He just shot someone. He set boundaries, Mama Raine said, but her voice was tight. That man suggested killing us, baby. Min responded the only way his world understands. This is wrong. All of this is wrong. We should leave. We should stay and give him a reason to be something better than this. Mama Raine's eyes were hard. That boy down there is drowning in blood and he doesn't know how to stop. Maybe we can't save him, but maybe we can remind him there's something worth saving. Over the next 2 weeks, the mansion transformed into something unprecedented in Seoul's underworld. Mama Raine refused to stay hidden in the guest wing. She took over the kitchen, much to the chef's initial horror and eventual delight. She planted roses in the courtyard garden, right where Dae-sung's blood had stained the stones. She read scripture on the terrace every morning at 6, and Min-seok joined her, sitting silently, sometimes with tears running down his face. Amara watched him with her researcher's eye, trying to reconcile the data. He was gentle with her grandmother, patient and soft-spoken. But she'd also seen him review execution orders over breakfast. She'd heard him on phone calls where he casually discussed breaking someone's hands. He was a split person, Jekyll and Hyde, except both versions were real and present simultaneously. How do you do that? She asked him one evening. They were in his study, Amara delivering reports on household expenses, Min-seok reviewing what looked like surveillance photos of a warehouse. Do what? Be two different people at once, be gentle with her and brutal with everyone else. Min-seok set down the photos. You're studying violence, right? Breaking cycles of trauma? Then you know the answer already. Trauma doesn't make you one thing. It splits you into pieces. You become whatever you need to be to survive. With her, I get to be the child she saved. With them, he gestured vaguely toward the window, meaning his organization. I have to be the monster they fear. Both are real. Neither is a lie. But you can't live fragmented forever. Eventually something breaks. I know. I've known since I was 16. But breaking was a luxury I couldn't afford until now. He looked at her directly for the first time, and Amara was struck by how young he looked despite being only 4 years older than her. You want to leave. I can see it in how you move through this house. You're afraid. Yes. Good. Fear is the only sensible response to me. But she's not afraid of you. She should be. I've done things that would make her sick if she knew the details. Mass executions, torture. I disappeared a prosecutor and his entire family last year because he was getting too close to our operations. I am not redeemable, Amara. I'm functional. There's a difference. Then why are you trying? Why sit with her every morning? Why pretend you're something you're not? Minsok was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because for 6 hours every day, she makes me believe I could be. And that lie, that beautiful, impossible lie, is the only thing keeping me from eating a bullet. So I'll take it. I'll take the lie and protect her, and pray that maybe, somehow, there's enough of that 10-year-old left inside me that I can change. Even though I know I can't. The raw honesty devastated Amara. This wasn't a villain monologue. This was a man who'd long ago accepted his own damnation and was now facing the cruelest torture imaginable. Hope. But outside the mansion walls, forces were already moving. Park Ji-won brought the news 3 days later during a private meeting. Amara wasn't supposed to be present, but Min Seok had started including her in discussions, saying if she was going to stay, she needed to understand the threats. 3 of our mid-level enforcers have defected to Kwan. Taejin, Park reported, his expression grim. Led by Han Siwoo, they're feeding him intelligence about our operations, about Mama Raine. How long have they been gone? We noticed yesterday, but listening to their communications before they went dark, we think they've been planning this since the courtyard incident. Minsok's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. Siwoo! I promoted him 6 months ago, gave him the Gangnam district. He thinks you've gone soft, thinks the old woman has neutered you, thinks it's time for new leadership. And Taejin is happy to use that narrative. Minsok stood and walked to the window overlooking the garden where Mama Raine was tending her roses. He'll come for her, not immediately. He'll wait until we're complacent, until we think we've weathered the worst of the gossip. Then he'll strike. We could send them away, Park suggested carefully. Protective custody. Different country. They'd be safe and out of play. She won't. Go. I already asked. Then we fortify, turn this mansion into a fortress and dare Taejin to try. Which is exactly what he wants. Pin me down, make me defensive, then systematically dismantle my operations while I'm busy playing bodyguard. Minsok turned back to Park. We're in an impossible position. If I send them away, I lose the only real thing in my life. If I keep them close, they become targets. If I fortify, I look weak. If I strike first, I confirm every rumor that I'm emotionally compromised and making reckless decisions. So what do? We prepare for war, quietly, double the perimeter security but keep it low profile, move our most liquid assets to secure accounts, call in every favor we're owed, and we wait for Taejin to make his move because he will. And when he does, we make sure it's the last mistake he ever makes. Amara listened to them plan violence with the casual efficiency of businessmen, discussing quarterly profits, and felt sick. This was her life now. This was what staying meant. Complicity, compromise, the slow erosion of every moral certainty she'd brought to Seoul. That night, she found her grandmother on the terrace, Bible open in her lap but not reading. We should leave, Amara said, before this gets worse. Can't leave now, baby. He needs us. He's a criminal. A killer. People are going to die because we're here. People were dying before we got here. People will die after we're gone. That's his world. Mama Raine closed her Bible. But maybe, just maybe, we can plant seeds that grow into something different. Maybe we can love him enough that he starts to love himself, starts to see a way out. That's not how trauma works, Grandma. You can't love someone out of PTSD. You can't pray away 20 years of violence. Maybe not, but you can witness it. You can say, I see what you've become and I'm not leaving. You can be the thing that reminds him he's human. She looked at Amara. You're studying this. Baby, you're researching how to break cycle of violence. Well, here's your case study. Here's a man who's been violent since childhood, who's built an empire on it, who doesn't know any other way to exist. Can he change? I don't know, but I know that abandoning him guarantees he can't. What if we die trying? Then we die trying, better than dying safe and alone, wondering what might have been. The theology was questionable, but the conviction was absolute. Amara realized with creeping dread that her grandmother had made her choice, and nothing, not logic, not fear, not even the very real possibility of death, would change it. Which meant Amara's choice was already made too. She couldn't leave Mama Raine, and Mama Raine wouldn't leave Min Sok. They were bound together now, for better or worse, in a family forged by trauma and held together by the desperate hope that love might be enough to redeem the irredeemable. It wasn't enough. But they didn't know that yet. 5 days later, the first direct threat arrived. Not an attack, not yet, just a message. Park Ji-won found it attached to a brick thrown through a window in the east wing, the same wing where Mama Raine was staying. The note was simple, typed on plain paper, no signature needed. The Reaper has a heart now. Hearts are easy to stop. Min Sok read it once, set it on fire with his lighter, and watched it burn in an ashtray. His expression never changed. When the last ember died, he looked at Park. Double the guard rotation. No one enters or exits without clearance. Install additional cameras in every blind spot. And get me everything we have on Kwan Taijin's current operations. Every warehouse, every account, every mistress, every weakness. If he wants to play psychological warfare, let's show him what psychological warfare actually looks like. Hyungnim, permission to speak freely? Always. This is going to get bloody, messier than anything we've done before, and the women will be here to see it, to see what you really are when cornered. Min Sok's face could have been carved from ice. Then they'll finally see the truth. Maybe that's what needs to happen. Maybe Mama Raine needs to understand that the boy she saved is gone, and what's left is just a weapon with his face. Maybe that's the kindness here. You don't believe that. No, but I need to, because what I actually believe, that I could be something else, something better. That's the thought that's going to get us all killed. Park Ji-won left, and Min Sok sat alone in his study, touching the cross against his chest, the weight of impossible choices crushing him from all sides. He'd survived 2 decades in Seoul's underworld by being calculated, emotionless, always 3 steps ahead. But Mama Raine had done the one thing he'd never prepared for. She'd made him care. She'd made him vulnerable. She'd reminded him that he was human. And in his world, human was just another word for target. Which brings us back to that night, to the attack, to everything converging at once. The assault came at 11:47 p.m., and it came hard and fast and overwhelming. 12 men hit the east wall with explosive charges, breaching the perimeter before the guards could fully respond. Gunfire erupted across the courtyard, automatic weapons lighting up the night like deadly fireworks. Min Sok was in his bedroom when the first explosion hit, and he was moving before the sound fully registered, gun in hand, instincts taking over. Park Ji-won's voice crackled through his earpiece. Multiple breach points, Hyungnim. 20+ hostiles. They're pushing for the main house. Where are Mama Raine and Amara? Central Hall, they were heading to the kitchen for tea. Get them to the safe room. Now. But Park's response was lost in another explosion that shook the mansion's foundation. Min-sok ran through corridors he knew by heart, his mind already calculating angles and positions, already accepting that people were going to die tonight, hoping desperately that it wouldn't be the two people who mattered most. He reached the central hall to find it already under siege. 3 of Taejin's men had breached the interior, and Mama Raine stood in the center of the hallway with her cane in one hand and Amara behind her, shielded. The elderly woman's face was set in lines of absolute determination, and Min-seok realized with dawning horror that she wasn't afraid. She was angry. "You boys picked the wrong house," Mama Raine said, her voice carrying despite the chaos. "Now I suggest you turn around and walk away before my boy gets here." One of the attackers laughed and raised his gun. Min-seok shot him 3 times before the laugh finished echoing. The man dropped and Min-seok was already pivoting, already firing, muscle memory and 20 years of violence transforming him into something efficient and terrible. The second attacker went down with 2 shots to center mass. The third tried to run, and Park Ji-won appeared from a side corridor and put him down with clinical precision. "Safe room!" Min-seok barked at Mama Raine. "Now! Not without you! This isn't a debate!" Another explosion cut him off. The lights flickered and died, emergency systems kicking in, bathing everything in red, emergency lighting that made the blood on the marble look black. More attackers poured through the breach. Park Ji-won and 6 of their men formed a defensive line, returning fire, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. This wasn't a raid. This was an execution squad. Min-seok grabbed Mama Raine with one hand and Amara with the other and dragged them toward the reinforced interior sanctum. Behind them, Park Ji-won shouted orders, coordinating the defense, buying them time with bullets and bodies. They made it to the reinforced corridor when a mercenary appeared from a side room, gun already tracking toward Mama Raine. Min-seok shoved her aside and took the first bullet in the shoulder, the second in the ribs. Body armor caught the second one, but the impact drove the air from his lungs. Pain exploded through his shoulder where the first bullet had torn through flesh. He kept moving, kept firing back, dropped the mercenary, but another one was already there, and then another. "Men!" Mama Raine's scream cut through the gunfire. He couldn't answer. Blood was soaking through his shirt, hot and slick. He was fighting on pure instinct now, wounded and bleeding, but still functional. Still protecting, because that's what weapons did, and that's what he was. A weapon. Just a weapon. Nothing more. The third mercenary aimed at Mama Raine again, and Min-seok knew with crystalline certainty that he couldn't reach her in time, couldn't stop it, couldn't save her. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed corridor. But Mama Raine didn't fall. The mercenary did, a neat hole in the center of his back, courtesy of Amara standing behind him with a fallen guard's pistol in. Her trembling hands, her eyes were wide, her face a mask of shock and horror at what she'd just done. The gun shook violently in her grip. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, I killed him. I killed—" "Later!" Min-seok grabbed her and Mama Raine both and hauled them through the final door into the safe room. Park Ji-won and 3 other guards piled in behind them and slammed the reinforced steel door shut. Locks engaged with heavy mechanical thunks. The sounds of battle became muffled, distant. Outside, the battle raged on. Inside the safe room, they had maybe 30 minutes before someone with cutting torches got through the door. Min-seok sank against the wall, his shoulder bleeding freely, his breathing labored. Each breath sent fire through his ribs. Mama Raine was immediately beside him, her hands pressing against the wound, her face tight with controlled fear. Her fingers came away red. "How bad?" "I'll live." He looked at Amara, who was still holding the gun, still staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. Her whole body was shaking now, tremors running through her like aftershocks. "Amara, look at me." She didn't respond. Shock was setting in, her breathing coming too fast. tears streaming down her face. Amara, he grabbed her shoulder, forced her to meet his eyes. You saved her life. You saved all of us. Do you understand? You did what you had to do. I killed someone, she whispered, her voice breaking. I took a human life. I saw his face. I saw him fall. Yes, welcome to my world. It doesn't get easier, but you live with it or you die with it. And right now I need you to choose to live because we're not out of this yet. Mama Raine took the gun from Amara's hands and pulled her granddaughter into a fierce embrace. Breathe, baby. Just breathe. We'll deal with this later. Right now we survive. Park Ji-won was on his radio, coordinating with the remaining guards. His face was grim, a cut bleeding above his eyebrow. Hyungnim, we're down to 8 men. They have us contained, and there's someone outside asking to speak with you. Taejin, how did you know? Because this isn't about taking territory. This is about breaking me, and he can't do that without gloating. Min Seok stood, wincing as fresh pain lanced through his shoulder, and moved to the communication panel. Blood dripped from his fingertips onto the floor. He pressed the button that would broadcast his voice to the exterior speakers. Taejin, I'm listening. The Viper's voice came through clear and mocking. Kang Min Seok, the Reaper, the legend, hiding in a metal box with an old woman and her granddaughter. How the mighty have fallen. If you came here to talk, you wasted good men for nothing. Say what you want or get off my property. Your property? Taejin laughed, the sound cruel and satisfied. Look around. Min Seok, this stopped being your property the moment you showed weakness. The moment you let emotions compromise. Your judgment. We grew up together. We survived the Crimson Tigers together. We were supposed to be the same. Cold, calculated, unstoppable. But you went soft. You found a mommy. Min Seok's jaw clenched. If you have a point, make it. My point is that you betrayed everything we built, everything we were. You chose love over power, so I'm going to teach you why that was a mistake. I'm going to take everything you love and burn it in front of you, starting with that old woman. Come out, or I start cutting pieces off her while you listen. Mama Raine put her hand on Min Seok's arm before he could respond. She leaned toward the microphone, her voice strong and clear despite the danger. This is Lorraine Washington, and I've got something to say to you, Mr. Taejin. My boy Min isn't weak because he loves me. He's stronger because now he's got something worth fighting for. Something worth dying for. You're just a sad man who's so broken inside that you can't imagine anyone else being whole. So go ahead and try. Come through that door. See what happens when you threaten his family. The radio was silent for a long moment. Then Taejin's voice returned, all mockery gone, replaced with cold fury. Fine, we'll do this the hard way. Breach teams, start cutting. I want them alive so I can kill them myself. The sound of industrial cutting torches started up outside the safe room door. Sparks began to show through seams in the reinforced steel, bright orange points of light in the darkness. Park Ji-won did a quick inventory, checking weapons and ammunition. We have 16 rounds left between us, against 20+ hostiles. If they breach, we last maybe 2 minutes. Then we make those 2 minutes count. Min Seok checked his own weapon despite the pain in his shoulder. The blood from his wound had soaked through his shirt and was dripping onto his pants, but the bleeding had slowed to a steady ooze. He could still fight. When they breach, I go first. Draw fire. You get Mama Raine and Amara out through the emergency exit. There is no emergency exit, Park said quietly. What? You ordered it sealed 3 years ago. Said it was a security risk. Too many ways in means too many ways out. Remember? Min Seok remembered. He'd made that call based on cold tactical logic, never imagining he'd be the one trapped inside. The irony would be funny if it weren't about to kill everyone he loved. He'd trapped himself in his own fortress. Then we fight our way out, he said simply. Against 20 men with 8 rounds and 2 wounded? Hyungnim? That's suicide. I didn't ask for a tactical analysis. I asked you to follow orders. They stared at each other, and Park Ji-won saw something in Min-seok's eyes that made him step back. This wasn't the Reaper making a calculated decision. This was a man who'd already accepted his own death and was now just trying to buy time for the people behind him to live a few minutes longer. The cutting torch reached the door. Molten metal dripped onto the safe room floor, hissing and smoking. They had maybe 5 minutes. Mama Raine stood and walked to stand beside Min-seok. Amara followed, still shaking but standing, her jaw set with determination, despite the terror in her eyes. 3 generations of people who'd survived impossible things, now facing the most impossible thing of all. Min, Mama Raine said quietly, I want you to know something before this ends. Whatever happens here, whatever you've done, wherever you go, you're still my boy. Still that scared kid I found in the rain. Still worthy of love, you hear me? I hear you. His voice was thick with emotion. And I'm proud of you. Not for this, she gestured at the mansion, the violence, the blood, but for trying, for letting me in, for choosing to be human again even when it terrified you. Min-seok felt tears track down his face and didn't bother wiping them away. They mixed with the sweat and blood already there. I'm sorry I couldn't be better. Be more. Be the person you deserve to find. You're exactly who you needed to be to survive. Now, we see if survival was enough. The door gave way with a screech of tortured metal. The first mercenary through took 2 rounds from Park Ji-won before going down. The second dove sideways and returned fire. The small space erupted into chaos, muzzle flashes, the deafening crack of gunshots in an enclosed space, smoke and blood and desperation. Min-seok fought like a man possessed, like he'd always fought, but there was a difference now. Before, he fought to win. Now, he fought to protect. And that shift, that subtle change in motivation, made him both more dangerous and more vulnerable. He dropped 3 attackers before taking another bullet, this one in the leg. His knee buckled and he stumbled, pain exploding up his thigh. But he kept firing, kept moving, kept putting his body between the threat and Mama Raine. Park Ji-won went down with a wound to the chest, blood bubbling from his lips, but he kept shooting from the ground, each shot weaker than the last. Their remaining guards fought with everything they had, but they were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Then Kwon Tae-jin himself stepped through the breach, and everything stopped. He was exactly what Min-seok remembered from their years together in the Crimson Tigers. Lean and dangerous, with eyes that had stopped seeing people as anything other than obstacles or assets. He held a pistol casually, like it was an extension of his hand, and his smile was the worst thing in the room. Last chance, Min-seok. Send the women out and we'll make this quick. Painless. A warrior's death. Or keep playing hero and watch me hurt them slowly while you bleed out on the floor. Min-seok tried to stand, and his leg gave out. He fell hard, his gun sliding across the blood-slick floor. Park Ji-won was unconscious now, his chest barely rising. Their guards were down. It was over. Tae-jin walked forward and pressed his gun against Mama Raine's forehead. She didn't flinch, didn't look away from his eyes. Any last words, old woman? Mama Raine looked at him with absolute contempt. Just one question. Who hurt you so badly that you forgot how to be human? Tae-jin's mask slipped for just a second, surprise flickering across his face, something like pain in his eyes. Then he laughed. Nobody hurt me. I just learned the truth faster than your precious Min-seok. That love is weakness, that caring is a trap, that the only way to survive is to burn out everything soft inside you until there's nothing left but edges. That's not survival. That's just slow death. Maybe, but at least I'll die undefeated. He cocked the hammer. The gunshot that followed wasn't from Tae-jin's gun. It was from the breached doorway, where Seoul Metropolitan Police SWAT teams were pouring through with lights and laser sights and shouted commands to drop weapons. The mansion had triggered a silent alarm system Park Ji-won had installed months ago. one that went directly to a precinct captain they had on payroll. Backup had arrived. Taijin spun and fired at the incoming officers. They returned fire, and he went down hard, chest blooming red. His last expression was shock, like he couldn't believe something as mundane as police could end him. He hit the floor and didn't move. The mercenaries either surrendered or died trying to fight their way past law enforcement. Within 3 minutes, the battle was over. Within 5, paramedics were working on the wounded. Within 10, Min-seok was being loaded onto a stretcher with Mama Raine refusing to leave his side. "I'm fine," he kept saying as they worked on his wounds, his voice weak. "You're shot 3 times, the paramedic countered, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt. "I said I'm fine." "Min, let them help you," Mama Raine said, her hand gripping his. "Let someone help you for once." He finally stopped fighting and let the exhaustion take him. The last thing he heard before losing consciousness was Mama Raine's voice. "You're going to be okay, baby. We all are. We survived." 6 days later, Min-seok woke up in a private hospital room that Park Ji-won had secured and paid for with organization funds before being transferred to another facility for his own surgery. The smell of antiseptic filled his nostrils. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring his vital signs. Every part of his body ached, a deep bone weariness that came from being shot multiple times and surviving by sheer luck. Mama Raine was asleep in a chair beside the bed, her Bible open in her lap. Amara sat by the window, staring at the Seoul skyline with hollow eyes. Dark circles shadowed her face. "How long?" Min-seok's voice came out as a rasp. Amara turned, startled. 6 days. You coded twice during surgery. They weren't sure you'd make it." "Park?" "Alive, recovering in another facility. The chest wound was serious, but he's stable. Most of the guards survived. 8 of Taejin's men died, including Taejin himself. The police are asking a lot of questions, but Park's handling it. Something about self-defense and property rights and very expensive lawyers." "And you?" Amara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was flat, emotionless. "I killed someone, Min-seok. I took a life. I keep seeing his face. I keep feeling the gun in my hand. I dream about it every night. The sound it made when he fell. My thesis is about breaking cycles of violence, and I just perpetuated one. You saved lives, including mine. By becoming what I was studying, by crossing the line I swore I'd never cross." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were haunted. "How do you live with it? All the deaths, all the blood. How do you function?" "Honestly, I don't know anymore. I used to think I'd compartmentalized it, locked it away where it couldn't touch me. But Mama Raine opened all those boxes, made me feel everything I'd been avoiding, and you're right, it's unbearable. The weight of all those deaths, all those choices. It should crush me. But it doesn't? No, because she's here, because you're here, because for the first time in 20 years, I have a reason to be something other than a weapon. I'm not saying I can fix what I've broken. I'm not saying I can undo the violence. But maybe I can stop adding to it. Maybe that's enough." Mama Raine stirred and opened her eyes. She saw Min-seok awake, and her face transformed with relief and joy. "Oh, thank God. Thank you, Jesus. I thought I'd lost you again. I'm hard to kill, apparently." "Good, because we've got work to do." She stood and took his hand, squeezing it tight. "I've been thinking a lot while you were sleeping, about what happens next, about what we do with this second chance." "I'm getting out," Min-seok said. "Park can handle the transition. Divide the territory, negotiate truces, make it clean, I'm done. And then what? What does Kang Min-seok do when he's not the Reaper?" "I don't know. I've never been anything else." "Then it's time to find out." Mama Raine's grip tightened. "That community center in Itaewon where I do mission work, they need funding. They need someone who understands how young men fall into violence because he lived it. They need someone who can teach them another way." "You want me to run a community center?" Minsok almost laughed, then winced at the pain in his ribs. Mama Raine, I'm a criminal. I'm wanted by half the organizations in Seoul. I've killed. I know what you've killed. I also know what you've saved. Yourself. Against impossible odds. So take that survival and teach it. Give those kids what I gave you, a second chance, a way out. Amara spoke up, her voice stronger now. My thesis needs a case study. Someone who's lived the cycle and broken it. Someone who can speak to both the trauma and the recovery. If you're serious about changing, I need to document it. All of it. The good and the terrible. The progress and the setbacks. You want to use me as a research subject? I want to partner with you. Create a model for intervention in at-risk populations. Prove that change is possible even in the most extreme cases. She paused. And maybe, in the process, I figure out how to live with what I did. How to integrate that violence into who I'm becoming. Minsok looked between them. This elderly woman who'd saved him 20 years ago and was now refusing to let him drown in his own darkness, and this young woman who'd killed to protect them and was now searching for meaning in the aftermath. His family. Broken and complicated and held together by trauma, but family nonetheless. Okay, he said finally. Okay, we try. I don't know if I can change. I don't know if redemption is possible for someone like me. But for you, for both of you, I'll try. Mama Raine leaned down and kissed his forehead. That's all I ever asked. That's all anyone can ask. Now rest. You've got a long recovery ahead, and then we've got work to do. 8 months later, the Second Chances Youth Outreach Center opened in Itaewon. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was small. No press, no politicians, just the people who mattered. Mama Raine held one end of the ribbon, Min Seok held the other, and Amara stood between them with scissors. 50 people gathered, community members, church volunteers, and the first cohort of at-risk youth they'd recruited. This center exists for one reason, Min Seok said to the crowd. He still walked with a slight limp from the leg wound. Because someone showed me that survival alone isn't enough, that you can live through impossible things and still choose to be human, that violence doesn't have to define you unless you let it. He looked at Mama Raine. This woman saved my life when I was 10 years old. She saved it again when I was 30, and now, together, we're going to try to save other lives, other kids who feel trapped, other young men who think violence is their only option. We're going to show them another way. And we're going to fail sometimes, Mama Raine added, her voice carrying. We're going to lose kids to the streets. We're going to face setbacks, because change is hard and trauma is heavy and sometimes love isn't enough. But we're going to try anyway, because the alternative is giving up, and we don't give up on our children. Ever. They cut the ribbon together, and people clapped. It was a small moment, a tiny act of creation in a world that specialized in destruction. But it was real. And for Min Seok, standing there with Mama Raine's hand in his, it felt like the first honest thing he'd done since he was 10 years old. Park Ji-won appeared at his elbow as the crowd filtered into the center. He still moved carefully, favoring his left side where the chest wound had been. Hyungnim? Or should I call you Mr. Kang now? Just Min Seok is fine. Hard to break old habits. I came to report that the transition is complete. All territories divided, all truces holding. The Kang organization officially disbanded as of this morning. You're out. Clean. And you? Starting a security consulting firm. Boring, legal, pays less, but I sleep better. Park smiled slightly. Never thought I'd see the day when the Reaper went straight. I'm not straight, I'm trying. There's a difference. Trying is good enough. Park bowed slightly, a gesture of respect between equals rather than subordinate to superior. It's been an honor, Hyungnim. Whatever comes next, I hope it's peaceful. He left, and Min Seok stood alone for a moment, watching through the windows as Mama Raine showed the youth around their new facility. Amara was conducting intake interviews, building her database, creating her research model. They were building something real, something good. It wouldn't erase the past. Nothing could. The people he'd killed stayed dead. The trauma he'd caused stayed caused. He would carry that weight until he died, and he accepted that. Redemption, if it existed at all, wasn't about erasing the ledger. It was about what you did after. How you spent the rest of your days, whether you added to the darkness or fought against it. A teenager approached him hesitantly, a boy maybe 15 with a black eye and defensive posture. "Mr. Kang, they said you used to be in a gang. That you got out?" "I did, both things." "How? How did you get out when everyone wants to pull you back?" Min-seok knelt to be at eye level with the kid. He saw himself at that age, scared, angry, convinced the world was nothing but violence and pain. He pulled out the wooden cross and showed it to the teenager. "Someone gave me this when I was about your age. Told me it meant I was never alone, never beyond help. I wore it every day for 20 years, even when I was doing terrible things, even when I forgot what it meant. And eventually, that person found me again, reminded me who I used to be, who I could be again." "So, someone saved you." "Yes. And now, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to save someone else." That's how you get out. You find something worth changing for. And you hold on to it even when everything in you screams to let go. You understand? The teenager nodded slowly. "I think so." "Good. Then let's start there. Let's figure out what's worth changing for in your life. And we'll build from that." They walked into the center together, past Mama Raine, who was organizing donations, past Amara, who was setting up interview spaces, into a future that was uncertain, but possible. Min-seok felt the weight of his past like chains, but he also felt something else, something he hadn't felt since he was 10 years old and bleeding in an alley in Atlanta. Hope. It was fragile and terrifying and probably foolish. But it was real. The wooden cross rested against his heart, a promise kept across decades and continents. Mama Raine caught his eye, across the crowded room, and smiled. Not the smile of someone who'd saved a life. The smile of someone who'd given life back to a person who'd forgotten they could live. Min-seok smiled back. For the first time in 20 years, it reached his eyes. 3 weeks later, everything changed again. Min-seok was in his office at the center, reviewing applications for their next youth cohort, when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Kang Min-seok. A voice he didn't recognize. Male. Cold. Speaking in flawless Korean, with a slight accent he couldn't place. The man who thinks he can just walk away. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been watching your little redemption project. Very touching, very inspiring, very naive." Min-seok's blood went cold. "If you have something to say it." "Kwon Tae-jin wasn't working alone. You killed a lieutenant, not the general, and the general is very interested in meeting you. Especially now that you've shown everyone your greatest weakness." "I don't have time for games." "Not a game. A promise. You took something from us. Now we're going to take everything from you. That old woman, the granddaughter, every child who walks through your center's doors, everyone you care about, one by one, until you understand that men like us don't get happy endings." The line went dead. Min-seok sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear. Outside his office, he could hear Mama Raine's laugh as she taught a cooking class, could hear Amara interviewing a new arrival, could hear the teenagers playing basketball in the courtyard they'd built. He'd thought he was out. He'd thought he could change. He'd thought love was enough. But the violence he'd run from for 8 months had just found him again. And this time, it wasn't coming for the Reaper. It was coming for Kang Min-seok, the man, the human, the person who'd finally found something worth living for, which meant it was coming for his. It was coming. Family. Minsok stood and walked to the window, touching the cross against his chest. In the reflection, he could see both versions of himself, the man he was trying to become and the weapon he'd always been. The question was, which one would he need to be to protect the people he loved? And the terrible answer was, probably both. He pulled out his phone and dialed Park Ji-won. "I need you to come back," Minsok said when Park answered. "We have a problem." Outside, the Seoul sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. The city that had made him a monster was about to test whether he could stay human, and somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching, waiting, planning. The serpent had learned to weep. But now he was about to remember how to strike. To be continued. If you want to know what happens next, if you need to see how this story ends, drop a comment telling me you're ready for part 2. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Because the war that's coming will test everything. Love, loyalty, redemption, and whether a monster can truly change when everything he loves is on the line.